What happens when two modern pound-for-pound giants collide in a fight that nobody thought was possible? Alexander Usyk conquered cruiserweight and heavyweight, becoming a unified champion in multiple divisions, while David Benavidez stormed through super middleweight and proved he could carry his power all the way up to cruiserweight. Both men jumped weight classes, collected elite accolades. Usyk vs Benavidez. Skill vs pressure. Important disclaimer. Large portions of this video were recorded before the recent Usyk vs Rico fight, and while this performance wasn't the best showcase of his skills, still believe that the outcome is fairly irrelevant to the result of this fight. It wasn't Usyk's strongest performance, but I think that a lot of this can be attributed to the fact that Usyk wasn't prepared for Rico's style because he didn't have a lot of boxing footage to go off of, and I believe there's less of an indication that he is in full decline. It's true, he did appear a little more stagnant and slower, but for the sake of this matchup, I would still argue that Usyk's foot speed is still faster than David Benavidez. With this context in mind, let's get back to it. Mike Tyson is around 5'10", and Usyk is over 6 feet. Yet, in many ways, Usyk is still considered small for the heavyweights today. Fighters like Tyson Fury are impossibly tall. He's that one giant from Jack and the Beanstalk. Fury's proportions physically do not make sense. He is an anomaly to the human species. He's an enigma. The physics of his body defy all reason. And Joshua and Wilder are tall too. Speaking of Ukrainians like Usyk, Klitschko was massive. But what makes this matchup so intriguing for me is that in the first time of what feels like ever, David Benavidez will be going into this fight with a height disadvantage. He will be facing a more natural cruiserweight, the first man in the four-belt era to become the undisputed cruiserweight champion. So the real story of this fight will be whether or not David Benavidez is able to use his frame to push Usyk back. Will he be able to successfully impose his size on the seemingly larger fighter? I think that Usyk's primary advantage in this fight is that he's able to fight better off the back foot. He can respond from pressure and escape from the ropes with ease, returning back to the center of the ring. For David, he thrives on forward momentum. In many ways, he's similar to Gennady Golovkin. Benavidez is at his most comfortable when he feels as though he can take your power and push you backwards. However, while he is still incredibly skilled, he's not as good on the back foot. It's not a method of fighting that he prefers. He would like to be the aggressor, initiating exchanges, corner you, and then take out his aggression. From what I've seen, Benavidez's primary strategy only works when he's in the center of the ring or pushing you backwards. Surprisingly, similar to Usyk, David Benavidez is actually an incredibly versatile fighter, but Usyk has significantly stronger fundamentals. His footwork is superior. He's kind of mastered that Ukrainian Soviet style of darting in and out. And then when you add the fact that Usyk was trained by Anatoly Lomachenko, it's clear that when it comes to fundamentals, Usyk is the more complete fighter. David might make up for it in his combination punching and overall power. Usyk combats with technique. David is elite, he's skilled, but sometimes he makes mistakes in his stance. On occasions, he squares up too much. This is usually when he's settling into a flurry of punches. His combinations are so effective that he can usually get away with it. Because he is so effective at overwhelming his opponents and inflicting so much damage on them, many of these technical flaws are overlooked. But I predict a pound-for-pound great like Usyk would be able to capitalize on this in a way that no other fighter has been able to before. After all, he is an Olympic gold medalist. Also, let's be real, he is the guy that beat all the best cruiserweights to become undisputed, and then said that wasn't challenging enough. Let me pack on the pounds. Let me climb the ladder and take the throne. Let me go all the way to heavyweight. Sometimes David Benavidez exits his combinations in a straight line, where a fighter like Usyk is more inclined to take angles to escape. Something that I need to emphasize though, with every fight, David is improving rapidly. Every fight that passes, I think he is more and more likely to beat Canelo Alvarez. If you asked me like 3 years ago who would win that fight, I would say 100% Canelo. David is undoubtedly a student of the sport. He is in or entering his prime as a fighter, and his achievements are already historic. However, sometimes in the middle of a fight exchange, he still has his chin up in the air. Normally when you compare that to his opponent's chins, their faces are getting disfigured, so he doesn't really care. But this is a technical flaw. Due to the explosive nature of his style, David Benavidez welcomes all firefights. This means that he often unnecessarily takes damage that he doesn't need to. But given that he's usually the stronger one in the ring, it usually works out for him. If you're a fighter that strikes David Benavidez, but then as you strike, you get hit with 3 more punches and then he takes a step forward, you are thinking to yourself that you have more problems to worry about. You're not really thinking about the fact that you just hit him clean. David is in many ways still adjusting to the power of cruiserweights, and this will not be a risk that he can take as he continues to move up in weight, if the heavyweight title is something that he would eventually consider. I know right now he's expressing some hesitation. And okay, this one's a little bit nitpicky, but David Benavidez sometimes likes to admire his work in the ring. I like to admire it from my TV at home. But after a long combination, sometimes there are gaps in focus. Okay, focus might be the wrong way to describe it, but he likes to see his opponents react to the pain that he's just inflicted onto them. However, when David Benavidez smiles at you in the ring, it's usually a sign that you only have a few rounds left. It's usually a sign that he has completely figured you out, and now it's only a matter of time. Compared to Usyk, David throws wider punches. Now, there are definitely still pros to throwing wider punches. If you are at an elite enough level, you can get away with this, no problem. However, wider punches take longer to travel, and naturally this time distance is something that Usyk could exploit. That being said, David Benavidez is probably one of the fastest punchers relative to his size. David Benavidez's best chance of victory is to get started earlier in the rounds. Usyk is one of those fighters that downloads data about his opponents. Normally this is a title that is also given to David Benavidez. However, when the two are faced off against each other, I think that Usyk takes this more into account more seriously. As I see it right now, if this fight were to happen today, I would give the victory to Alexander Usyk. However, if Usyk is still fighting into his 40s and David continues to improve, I very much see a possibility where Usyk could be defeated for the first time ever. The outcome is very much contingent on the timeline for which this fight would take place. People might be asking me, why are you covering this fantasy matchup? But I believe there is a timeline where this could take place. It's one of those money fights that the boxing promoters are advocating for. David Benavidez has successfully defeated a champion at cruiserweight. His recent outing against Zurdo Ramirez proved that his power could carry all the way up to higher weight classes. At light heavyweight, people doubted his capabilities, because as you probably already know, a David Benavidez competition usually ends in a brutal knockout. Once he left the super middleweight division, people began to doubt his power. People started to undermine some of his achievements and characterized him more as a weight bully preying on smaller opposition. Part of what makes the David Benavidez game plan so effective is his relentless pressure. He will weigh on you and make sure that you cannot breathe in that ring. In that square circle, he is hunting you like a shark, driving you back to the ropes and then unleashing a flurry. He stands out from other fighters his size because of his combination punching. Both Usyk and David Benavidez are rhythm fighters. They like to dictate the pace of the action. Usyk's pressure is a little more subversive. He slowly chips away and breaks opponents down by darting in and out. In many respects, his fight style is very similar to Lomachenko. Usyk's fight plan always revolves around distance control. He is constantly repositioning. Usyk shuffles backwards until he can hit an opponent in a place where they can't hit him. He weaponizes lateral movement and angles to cut the distance, but Usyk also anticipates the return fire and slips to the side. He uses upper body movement, hinging from his waist, dipping his knees, and countering while his opponent tries to strike him. His superpower is his stamina. With persistent jabs and feints, he will categorically dismantle an opponent. If you're trying to survive 12 rounds against Alexander Usyk, you need to engage in some serious tactical warfare. If you want to make it out of the onslaught, you have to dig deep. You would have to think like 10 steps ahead and counter the move after the move that he's already countered. And most fighters, even experienced counterpunchers, can't always operate at that pace. It's hard enough to think ahead and plan your own game plan. But then when you add on top of it punches that you didn't anticipate, it's too many variables for most fighters, and that's one of the reasons that Usyk also gets the upper hand. Due to his god-tier cardio, Usyk really comes alive in the second half of his fights. It appears as though he has multiple gears while fighting, and all of this while adapting to a fighter's previous adjustments. I personally think that there are many misconceptions about Usyk's power in the heavyweight division. I heard some people say that he was pillow-fisted, or that he just doesn't hit hard, but I think that people aren't paying enough attention. Usyk has tremendous power. Definitely not as much as someone like Anthony Joshua, but he's still a conventionally sound heavyweight. I would also say that Dubois, Wilder, and Derek Chisora all hit harder than him, but it's not like he doesn't possess the ability to knock out elite fighters. I think that he just had to take a little bit of time to settle into the heavyweight division. You can see in his fights against Daniel Dubois that he has some serious power. He at least has enough force to make you respect him. There's an old saying that anything can happen in the heavyweight division. It's no secret that at this level, and with all these big boys getting extra thick, it's clear that anyone can knock out anyone. Everyone is just one punch away from their career trajectory changing forever. I think what people see with Usyk's power is that he doesn't always load up. He's punching quickly, and throwing rapidly in quick succession, and as a result, his goal is for his punch to hit the target more than it is for it to be a concussive blow. He varies the tempo of his punches, he varies which ones are heavy-handed, and I think because of that, sometimes people will see Usyk land a soft jab, but really this is just one of the ways that he conserves energy. If you had a fighter like Usyk stand flat-footed and then wind up fully, there would be significant force on those punches. But Usyk is so mobile, and as a result, it appears as though his power suffers. He is constantly shifting between different angles, finding new looks on his opponents. It is true that Usyk knockouts come more specifically from his precision and his accuracy. Usyk's strikes are usually well-timed. When fighters hit the canvas against Usyk, they fall because of his good technique. Whereas if you compare him to a fighter like Deontay Wilder, the opponents can't handle the sheer force, and even a grazing blow might still knock someone out. If we are evaluating Usyk on potential weaknesses, there aren't that many to think of. He really is one of the most complete fighters out there. He has masterful defensive capabilities, and his offensive output is somewhat underrated. Even when he wasn't able to knock a fighter like Anthony Joshua out, he was always one punch away from doing so. Towards the conclusion of their first fight, he staggered him. If you were to critique Usyk, you might argue that he is weaker to the body. This, of course, is evidence from the time he went down from an alleged low blow from Daniel Dubois, a very controversial moment in his career. But also, as I have mentioned before, Usyk has been dropped by Artur Beterbiev in the amateurs. Now, I dare any one of you to take a body shot from Beterbiev and still be standing. One of the reasons that he appears vulnerable to the body is because his head is so well protected. So when his opponents do show moments of success, they are targeting the one part of the body that cannot move. His head will move off center line, but his torso will stand in place. Usyk is a real technician. His stance is always balanced. He has an effective jab and good punch variety. He never lingers in one position too long, and he has the distinct ability to constantly make new adjustments as the fight progresses. Usyk's number one enemy is just Father Time. So far, as of last year, he has shown that he has been able to maintain his endurance. However, fighters inevitably break down with age. Next January, it will be the Ukrainian's 40th birthday. If you are past the age of 35 in boxing, you are considered an old fighter. There are legends like Bernard Hopkins who have defied this standard. But for the majority of fighters, this is almost a universal truth. I would say that an underrated weapon to use against Usyk is the uppercut. Tyson Fury had a lot of success throwing this punch in their first bout. He staggered Usyk. Fury made him fully retreat until he had time to recover. Usyk likes to slip to his sides, and a well-timed uppercut can be thrown from different angles that he can't always anticipate. Usyk would actually have a longer reach than David Benavidez, which means that he would be able to measure him easily with the jab, using it both as a rangefinder and a way to set the pace of the interactions. Because of his almost 4-inch reach disadvantage, David Benavidez might elect to not even throw the jab as much, and simply rely on closing the distance with his footwork and power punches. If there was one punch that opponents were able to land on David Benavidez, it would be the jab. In one fight, he was even dropped by a jab. It's going to be one of those clunky orthodox versus southpaw matchups, and I anticipate them having a clash of heads at least once, because David will have to try and find a range where Usyk is not completely comfortable, and that is a challenging task. Normally, David Benavidez operates well at mid-range. However, in this moderately close combat distance, I think that Usyk actually has the advantage, because he has the ability to dart in and out quicker, even though he is technically the bigger man. I would say that David Benavidez probably has faster hand speed. Usyk undoubtedly has better timing and has better foot speed. I think that these instincts will ultimately help him win the fight. David might have his moments. If Usyk can make David Benavidez hesitant to throw because he's worried about what is coming back, then the competition might quickly become one-sided. A fighter like Caleb Plant had glimpses of success against David Benavidez in the early rounds, and elements of this style Usyk might be able to replicate, but better and at a much bigger size. The incredible irony of this fight is that I predict David Benavidez to be a better heavyweight than most of the competition that Usyk has faced. You can fight with me in the comments, but I think that David Benavidez is more skilled than Anthony Joshua and definitely Derek Chisora. On a purely technical level, he laps Daniel Dubois. Some of these men use their power and size as a crutch, but they just aren't as dynamic. Their power and size is always their get-out-of-jail-free card. And say what you will about David Benavidez, his defense is actually improving a lot. He's not the same fighter he was when he had his title stripped. To my knowledge, he's not doing substances in the same way that he was before. And as a result, through his actions, I believe that David Benavidez is making a statement about his place in boxing history. He is presenting himself as a fighter that is both disciplined and focused. However, many of the same issues that I anticipate David Benavidez having against Alexander Usyk, I believe that he will also have against Dmitry Bivol. Even though their styles and methodology deviate slightly, there are many parallels between Usyk and Bivol. Bivol prefers much simpler combinations. He's very into the Russian jab cross, get out of range, rinse repeat style. And statistically, Bivol actually had better defense. But what made Usyk so incredible was that he was able to perform elite defensive maneuvers against the biggest men in the sport. When you are carrying that much weight around, every movement is taxing. Usyk's offense is omnipresent. He can keep you flinching. Usyk will bait you into overcommitting and then punish you with a counter. And meanwhile, through it all, you are already using so much mental energy trying to defeat him that you are exhausted even though you have been relatively inactive. Usyk might have made everyone doubt what a heavyweight should even be anymore. While looking at this modern division, the strategy appeared to be the bigger man who can punch harder will win the fight. But Usyk came into the division still relatively small because too much weight would slow him down. The advantages he would get in punching power would not be enough to make up for his deficits in stamina. And once Usyk realized that he could take heavyweight punches, there wasn't that much of a reason for him to pad on any extra weight against fighters like Tyson Fury. He obviously weighed more than he did at cruiserweight, but a fighter like Zhang will walk into the heavyweight division weighing over 280 pounds. That's basically a 300-pound boulder that wants to take you out. David Benavidez is coached by his father, Jose Sr. There are many iconic father-son duos in boxing. Even though they have a tumultuous past, you can point to the Mayweathers. You also have Devin Haney and his father. You also have Teofimo Lopez and his father, Tyson Fury and his dad. On the one hand, these trainers probably know their fighter better than anyone else, and they are truly invested in their well-being. They usually value and support their sons. However, sometimes these dynamics can complicate coaching. These biases can impact the way they give instructions. Meanwhile, Usyk's coach is not his blood relative. Sometimes coaches live vicariously through a fighter. Sometimes they're overprotective, and other times they don't pull their fighter out when they really should. These variables might come into play at a contest of this magnitude. They probably won't, but it's worth considering every factor. If David Benavidez were to somehow defeat Alexander Usyk and even consider this fight, if he were to actually meet the moment and take the challenge on, he would go down in history as one of the best fighters to ever lace up a pair of gloves. If he were to win, his name would already be next to Roy Jones Jr. This would be like Crawford jumping up against Canelo, only several divisions higher. Again, if Mike Tyson was 5'10", then David Benavidez definitely has the frame to entertain a contest at heavyweight. If you put David Benavidez against an aging fighter like Chisora, I think that he would 100% win. I skew towards Usyk in this bout. I think he has the experience acclimating to the heavyweight division. I think that he brings a style that is challenging for anyone. But David has shocked the world before, and it's always criminal to underestimate David Benavidez. Overall, I think that Usyk has the better chin, but maybe Usyk is also susceptible to more body work than David Benavidez. It's difficult to say. For those of you that are like, this fight will never happen, why are you even entertaining this? What are you talking about? For one, a boy can dream. Two, you need a little bit of hope in your life. And also, it's not like crazier things haven't happened. Over the past 5 years, the sport has been flipped upside down. Usyk is currently entertaining a fight with a kickboxer, again, someone that isn't even in the sport, in Egypt in front of the pyramids, quite literally fighting next to a tomb of dead guys, or the monument that the aliens built. He literally had a fight in New York City, like in the middle of traffic, honking in the background. So it's only out of reach until it actually happens. Right now, it doesn't appear like David is interested in entertaining this offer, but the idea is in circulation and it has been brought to his attention. For the right price, anyone in this business can be bought, except for me, because I'm different. If anyone wants to test that theory, you can try to pay me. See what happens. I like bouts where the best fight the best. Up until recently, these kind of fights were a rare commodity. But the fact that we had Beterbiev versus Bivol and then Usyk versus Crawford, the tides are starting to change. After an absolute famine, boxing fans are finally eating good. And only a decade late, we might finally get that Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua fight. Usyk had more challenging fights at cruiserweight. By and large, his opponents at cruiserweight were more skilled than his opponents at heavyweight. This is something to keep in mind when you consider how he compares to David Benavidez. If I had to guess which fighter was more likely to knock out the other, I would say that David Benavidez would actually have the upper hand. However, I actually anticipate this fight going to a decision. Usyk might be able to hurt David Benavidez, but I think he is strong enough to pick himself up off the canvas if he ever were to go down. But if it goes to a decision and the fight takes place in the next 2 years, I think that Usyk has the upper hand. Again, as more and more time passes and David becomes stronger and stronger, the dimensions of the fight become more skewed in his direction. Food for thought. David might resort to more unorthodox tactics to level the playing field. He might try to manipulate Usyk's guard, press on his arms, cover his mouth, stuff like that. But realistically, how do you see this fight going, and does it even get made? One fight that I'm absolutely confident that the heavyweight fighter would lose is Mike Tyson versus Floyd Mayweather. This fight promo might be one of the biggest disasters I've ever seen. But if you want to see a thorough breakdown about the 10 reasons that Floyd Mayweather absolutely dismantles Iron Mike Tyson, check out this video right here. Hit that red button to give me that dopamine, and peace.